Hello, my name is Michael Driscoll, and in today's tutorial we will be learning about lists. Lists in Python are a type of data, or a data type, just kind of like a dictionary or a tuple or an integer or a string. Other languages can call lists arrays. To create an array or a list in Python, you can use square braces to be empty to create an empty list. If you want to add items to it, you just put commas between the items. You can use a list comprehension. I mentioned chapter 13 here because this particular talk is based off of my book Python 101, second edition. If you want to learn more about list comprehensions, you can go check out my book or a later video that I'll be adding eventually. Another way to create a list is to use the list function. Let's go ahead and look at some examples here. So here we have list. My list equals square brace or square bracket 1, 2, 3, and so we have a list of 3 items, and they're all 3 integers. You could use the list function to create a list. So for example, you might want to create a list of strings. A string is an iterable, and when you pass a string to list, the list function, it will iterate one letter at a time through the string. So this will create a 3-item list with 3 strings in it, one for each letter in the string. Let's look at one more example of creating empty lists. So let's say you have an empty list equals to 2 square braces, or just list with no iterable passed to it. If you run this code, you will see that the lists are empty, or in this case, another empty list is empty. Lists have methods because everything in Python is an object. Here are the primary methods: append, declare, copy, count, extend, index, insert, pop, remove, reverse, and sort. Let's talk about some of these methods. So let's create a list, and then we'll count the number of C's in it. So here you can see there A, B, C, C. If you run count, you will end up with 2 for the count. If you want to get the index of C, you can run this code. So let's say you do index. Indexes in lists start at 0, 0, 1, 2. So index of C will find the first instance of C in the list, which happens to be index number 2. Index of A will be 0 because A is the first item in the list. You can reverse a list with the reverse function. So if we run this, you can see that it now begins CCBA. There are 3 different ways to add to a list. You can use append, extend, or insert as the methods that you would use. So let's create our list again, start over from scratch, and then we will append the string something to it. So now we have A, B, C, C, and we've appended the extra string something to the end. So append will add an item to the end of the list. If you run the length, you can see that it now is 5 items instead of 4. If you use the insert method, you can tell it where to insert the item. So let's say we want to insert at the 0 index. That will put the first string at the very beginning of our list. This list is only strings. You don't have to just put strings in there. You could put in like a tuple. Let's say we wanted to do first, second here and rerun this. Now this list has a tuple at the beginning, first and second, and the first string A, B, C, D, C, and then something at the end. There are 2 other ways to add items to a list. You can add an interval to a list using extend. I'll delete this code for now because we don't need it. Alright, so we have 2 lists, my list and other list. If you want to add other list to my list, one easy way to do that is to say .extend. When you run this code, you can see that each of the items in other list were basically appended to the end of my list. Another way to do this is to use concatenation. So we can use the plus symbol to basically add the 2 lists together, and you'll get the same kind of thing going on here. Now let's go back a second. I do want to show you what happens if you append a list to another list. So let's say that we want to append other list to the end of my list. Let's get rid of this part for now. If you do this, you will end up with a nested list. So here you have 1, 2, 3, and then the list 4, 5, 6 inside, instead of having each individual item extended to the end of it. So depending on your use case, you might use append or you might use extend. It's really up to you and what you're trying to do. All right, let's talk about accessing and changing list elements. To access an item in a list, you need to use square braces and pass in the index of the item that you wish to access. So if you want to access item 0, you can use, which is the first item, use square braces and 0. If you'd like to grab the middle item, you might do 1. And if you want to grab the last item, you could use 2. Or you could even use a negative value, which I think we look at in the next one, but let's just do that real quick. -1, -2, we'll grab from the back 1, 2. Just kind of play around with that, see how it works. Yeah, I do talk about doing that right here. So -1 also works. If you try to access an index that does not exist in the list, you will receive an index error. So in this example, I tried to grab -5, but even +5 wouldn't work here because this list only has 3 items in it. Let's talk about deleting from a list. There are actually several different ways to do this. You can use clear, pop, remove, or del. Let's look at clear. Clear will actually empty the list entirely. So if we run this, you can see that my list is now empty. If you'd rather delete just a little bit out of it, you can use pop or remove. Let's start with pop. Here, if you run pop, it will pop the last item off of the list. So number 3 gets popped off and it actually returns it. I don't have it here, but if we were to say x equals mylist.pop, we could print out what's going on. So what happens is it pops the last item and returns it. So we caught the last returned item in X, and that's why when we print it out, it tells us that 3 was the item that was popped. All right. Remove will delete the first instance of the passed-in item. So if I try to remove the number 2, it will go through the list looking for the number 2 and then remove it, like it does here. If you try to remove an item that doesn't exist, you'll end up with an error. So I tried to remove the number 4. 4 isn't in the list, so you get a value error. Let's talk about sorting a list. Lists in Python can be sorted. There are 2 ways to do it. You can use the built-in sort method that's part of the list, or you can use Python's sorted function. So let's take this unordered list and let's try sorting it. By default, it will always sort it from lowest to highest in ascending order. A common misconception with Python is that if you call sort, you can assign the result to a variable like this. So I think I'm going to get a sorted list here by saying mylist.sort. If I run this, I quickly find out that I don't get a sorted list. I get none returned. This can lead to strange bugs in your code because you think you have a sorted list when you don't. So sort doesn't actually return a sorted list. It always returns none. If you'd like a way to return a sorted list, you could write a function, or you could just use Python's built-in sorted method or function for this. So let's try this. My list is unsorted. I want to sort it using the sorted function of Python. If I run this, you can see that sorted will sort my list and return the sorted. Well, it doesn't actually sort my list. It creates a new list that is sorted. You can see that my list remains unsorted because when I print it out, it's still unsorted. If you do mylist.sort, it will sort it in place and replace this list that is here with a sorted list. So this is basically creating a copy. The nice thing about sorted is that you can tell it to reverse the list. So if I run this, oops, I actually deleted my code here. Hey, let's go back a second. What is this example? We'll say reverse equals true and run this. We'll get rid of this because it's kind of confusing. Okay, so now it sorts it from highest to lowest, 23 to 1, by saying reverse equals true. All right. List slicing is the last topic to talk about, I believe. Python lists support the idea of slicing. Slicing a list is done by using square brackets and entering a start and stop value, although the start and stop values are optional. So if you want to grab like items 1 through 3 in your list, remember that 1 isn't actually the beginning value, 0 is. And it'll grab from 1 up to but not including 3. So if I run this code, it'll start at 1, right here, go to 2, but not include 3, which is 1. So we grab these two items here. Oops. You can also use negative indexing. This will grab the last two items off of the list. Yeah, let's just grab this to make it clear what's going on here. Whoops. Go here and paste. Alright, -2 are the last two items. And then, of course, you can... I have the wrong code here. Let me go to that. Here we go. You don't have to give a start value. Instead, you can just give it the ending value. So here we go 0, 1, 2. Don't include the third value or anything beyond it. Oh yes, copying a list is actually the last one, I think. Alright, occasionally you'll want to copy a list. One simple way to do that is to use the copy method. So I want to create a new list. I can just say mylist.copy. And that creates a new list. Let's do a quick test here. Let's just grab the ID of my list. And we'll print it out. And we'll print out the ID of the new list and see if they're the same. I am curious. Oops, I didn't do that right. Close that parenthesis, print ID new list. Alright. So here you can see that the two IDs are different. So these two lists are different objects. Another way to copy a list is to use this goofy syntax. This is that slicing syntax that we saw earlier. So there's no start or stop value, which means that you want to create a new list that includes every item in the list. So that works as expected. It just looks kind of weird. The last way to create or copy a list that I'm going to talk about here is by using the list function. You can use list, it iterates through it, creates a new list. And then finally, I just want to mention that's kind of a warning. Sometimes lists have weird issues where if you change an item in one list, it affects the copied list. If you run into this, it's because when you use any of these methods, you're creating a shallow copy. If you want to create a completely separate copy, use Python's deep copy method that is in its copy library. So what you would do is you'd import copy and then do copy.deepcopy and then pass your list to it. And it would create a list that is not attached in any way, form, or fashion to the previous list. Alright, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments below. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.